Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT 90.1 FM Houston, your community radio station. We have a great program for you today. Title of the show, Police Assaulting POCs Bodies, Union Leader on Amazon, Alabama Unionization Failure, and Director, Producer, Author Kanegis. Two police officers who assaulted an Afro-Latino Army lieutenant should only be fired but prosecuted for assault. The police officers are thugs, animals that have no right on the police force. For those who wonder why we talk about defund the police, this is a constant for some. Second topic, activist Brittany Packnett Cunningham did not mince her words or discuss for policing in America that is systemically fatal for people of color. Third topic, Danny Fetanti knew exactly why the unionization attempt failed at Amazon in Alabama. And it's the same story over and over again. One must do the work. And the last subject is director, producer, author Kanegis appeared with us to discuss his new film, The World Is My Country. But he discussed much more. We discussed many of the issues affecting the world on the role of the corporate the role the corporate structure plays in it. I want to stress that this is your station, and thanks to so many of you, we are holding on in these difficult times as we serve our community. I must thank the following supporters, donors, and subscribers to our station who've really helped out KPFT via Politics Done Right over the last few weeks. Madeline Cosette Williams, thank you so kindly. Erika Sesanov, thank you so kindly. Anand Bhatt, Dr. Anand Bhatt, thank you so kindly. Mark Corson, thank you so kindly. Kurt Gurdam, thank you so kindly. Davy Salerno, thank you so kindly. Bonita Solberg, thank you so kindly. Charles Conlon, thank you so kindly. Cindy Alsbrook, thank you so kindly, folks. Before we get started, please remember to keep your community radio station, KPFT, in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends to tune in to 90.1 FM Houston or listen at kpft.org. Likewise, keep our 100,000 watt station that covers the entire Southeast Texas on air by donating what you can afford to our website, kpft.org. Please do so in the name of Politics Done Right. Lastly, remember, you can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTOWILLIES. Well, let's get busy. Whenever you hear about defund the police and all that sort of stuff, people try to get the wrong impression as far as what it means. What it means is that the police force as constituted today is a clear and present danger for many, many American citizens, for mostly, again, people of color or people in disadvantaged areas, etc., etc. This story about this black Army lieutenant who has a new SUV with the temporary plates on and being chased down by cops, and the cops lying about him being a felony type stop. It's simply amazing. The Daily Coast wrote last December, Army Lieutenant Carolyn Nazario was on his way home with a new SUV when the lights of a police car approached behind him. Rather than pull over on a narrow, darkened street, he went for about 60 seconds to a place where there was light, and thank God he did that. There he was confronted with two police officers, gun drawn, for a stop on a license plate. And then the remainder is it could have been deadly. Here it is.
Open the door, get out the car!
The body camera video is telling. Two Windsor police officers get out to conduct a traffic stop last December with guns drawn.
Keep your hands outside the window.
The man they pulled over?
I'm actively serving this country, and this is how you're going to treat me?
U.S. Army 2nd Lieutenant Karan Nazario.
Whoa, hold on. What's going on?
Ultimately pepper sprayed.
Get on the ground.
Can you please talk to me about what's
Get on
going
the ground.
on?
Get on the ground now.
All for what his attorney says was the officer's suspicion that Nazario was driving without a license plate.
This has got to stop.
Jonathan Arthur says his client is a victim of police brutality. In this case, at the hands of officers Joe Gutierrez and Daniel Crocker. Arthur says his client had temporary tags that were displayed in the rear window of the SUV the entire time. In a federal lawsuit, he argues Nazario's Fourth Amendment rights were violated when he was illegally pulled over, detained, and searched by officers.
They knew they were in the wrong, and then they threatened to destroy a man's career if he called him out on it.
After the encounter calms down, in body camera video, you can hear one of the officers appearing to explain how he's willing to not charge Nazario for obstruction of justice because the Army would find out if they do. But the officers also maintain they originally became aggressive when Nazario didn't immediately pull over or get out of the car when they requested. Arthur says his client just wanted to make sure he pulled over in a well-lit area.
Now, when you take a look at this, right, like I wrote in the top of the piece here, these two police officers should not only be fired, but prosecuted for assault. The police officers are thugs, animals that have no right on a police force. For those who wonder why we talk about defund the police, this is a constant for some of us. This is uncalled for. This is not the people who we look at as, if I am in trouble, they are there to protect me. These are the people we see as being violent towards our own persons. That is not right, and that has to stop. These two guys, they are not police officers or what we expect police officers to be. They are thugs. They are animals. Now, you see, this is not anything new. We have a case going on now with George Floyd, and now we have this as well. It's a constancy. Even after George Floyd, their animalistic behavior continues. In one of the most passionate, truthful, fact-based articulation, Brittany Packnett Cunningham gets this systemic policing problem. She hits the nail on the head. Listen to this and we'll take it on the other side.
Very clear that this is fully systemic, and to quote Phil, that this is about the entire house. I find that in far too many places outside of Ithaca, New York, and a couple of other corners of this country, we're not making the kind of progress that we deserve because we're not having the right conversation. Chris, if you ran a company and you hired an outside contracting firm to come and help you solve problems, and they came in and they did their job, and when they did their job, they didn't solve most of the problems. They didn't prevent the problems from happening. And in fact, they caused new problems of their own. And they caused those problems incredibly severely against certain people who work for and with you, who were your neighbors, people that you loved. And then they came back to you at the end of that year and they said, pay us more money. And in fact, don't just pay us more money. Make sure that the people that we caused the most harm to help pay the bill. You would laugh them out of the room, because in this country that is built on a violent capitalism, that is most often defended by the very people who still tell us to back the blue, that would be a laughable premise. And yet, we continue to increase police budgets every single year. Only 46% of violent crimes are actually solved by police. Only 18% of property crimes are actually solved by police. Why are we giving them a raise? And every single day, we are forcing Black Americans, whether we want to or not, to invest in institutional projects that are built based on how effectively they express violence against our bodies, our minds, and our families. And then this country has the audacity and the unmitigated gall to turn around and demand that we are patient, that we are understanding, and that we try reforms that haven't worked time and again. It is insulting, and let's be very clear, for Daunte Wright, it is deadly. Time up.
Time up. it is clear that we are not paying these guys on performance. She gave the numbers that shows they are very ineffective. They increase their budgets every year. When we talk about defunding the police, what we're talking about is fund them no more. Don't be giving them additional funds to decimate the bodies of POCs. Why would we be doing that? Which is what exactly we're doing. We're constantly paying them more to hurt a particular group of people. The only reason we're seeing this now is that the ubiquity of video, the ubiquity of recording devices. This is not new, but we're seeing it now. And the fact of the matter is, America is paying an army, a police force that has the bird's eye, that has the crosshairs on people who look a certain way. It is time to end it. And it is time, first of all, for these reforms that we're talking about is more than monetary. It's more than defunding or removing funds. It is also holding them legally accountable by removing immunity so that when they murder somebody that was undeserving of being shot, that they themselves are treated like the murderers that they are. I want to stress, these are not isolated incidents. The police is a reflection of society. The only difference here is they are a reflection of society with the legal authority to murder. Let's realize that if we want change, it has to start from all of us, irrespective of who we are. The change starts with all of us, and then it will be reflected in those who commit these crimes against a sect of our community. We were supposed to have a new union in Alabama for the Amazon workplaces. It didn't happen. There are various reasons why it didn't happen. So my thoughts were, how can I find out exactly what's happening in the psyche of people that would have them not see the necessity when going up against companies like Amazon, that in fact we do need a union? How best to answer these questions than to speak to a former union head? Today we are honored to have Danny Fitanti. Danny Fitanti, welcome to Politics Done Right Special. How are you doing today, sir? Let me ask you something, Danny. Tell our audience a little bit about you before we get into the subject.
Well, I was a labor organizer for 34 years. I started organizing in Tupelo, Mississippi. I was in a training program by the Industrial Union Department, and where we got multiple trainings by experienced organizers. And the Industrial Union Department invested in developing 3 years of organizers that worked on the field with campaigns, and we tried to do everything the right way. So, for example, we emphasized gathering up information before you have an open campaign, so you know everything about the workforce, and that you know who the social leaders are in every group. In the South, especially Mississippi, it was important to pay attention to race relations so that you involved whites and blacks. No matter what the ratio was, you had to have folks from both groups on your organizing committee. And then build an organizing committee where the major form of communication with workers was through the organizing committees talking to people in their departments. My first campaign, when I met with a group of workers who had been involved in 2 previous losing campaigns, I sat down with folks and they were all white. And I knew the plant was about 40% black. I said, "We're the African-American workers." And they said, "Well, this is our organizing committee we've had for the last 2 campaigns." And I explained, "You lost both campaigns. So I want representatives, the most respected black workers from each department, to show up at our next committee meeting." And they said, "Well, this is the way we've always done it." I said, "Well, we're not doing a campaign unless we have representatives from all the groups." And they said, "Well, why don't you go get them?" And I said, "No, They don't worry whether I want them at the meeting. They're going to worry whether you have to go to your coworkers who are the most respected. After debate a little bit, they finally agreed to it. And our next committee meeting, we had people, a strong multiracial organizing committee.
Now, let me ask you this, Danny. When this unionization effort started in Alabama, and we had the likes of Bernie Sanders going down to the plant to try to convince these people that that's in the best interest of the workers. Likewise, we had Biden giving them sort of a tacit support, encouraging unionizations. How could a program fail, and not only fail, but not only fail, but fail as badly as it did in Alabama? What is the genesis of the issue out there?
Having speakers, and I have a very high the campaign. Every time you bring in VIPs and have them do something, you're emphasizing that the union is an outside force, people talking to people instead of people on the inside doing the work. We went to Bessemer, Barbara and I, a week before the election, and we went to the plant gate. And when you drove up to the plant gate, there was tons of yards, set off an alarm bell. If you're doing yard signs on a highway to telling people to vote union, there's something wrong with the communication. The communication should be between respected workers on the inside and their coworkers. And if you have to put yard signs outside, there's something missing in the campaign, and we weren't sure of it. So we talked to the one person who was at the plant gate with a sign saying vote union. The person wasn't a worker, didn't know what the issues were, and it was sort of like signs are going to make people. The emphasis of that campaign was they had another great person, Reverend Barber. He did a rally, and these are him and Bernie are wonderful people. The fact that the PR department of the union seemed to be making the decisions instead of field organizers was an indication that there was something off in this campaign. What I found out was when the union filed the petition, they thought there was 1,500 workers in the plant instead of over 5,000. Now, if you file a campaign and you don't even know what the workforce is, there's a serious problem. And the fact that into the media about this, you don't want to do that in a campaign. You really have to do the work. And what the problem is many of our unions are not investing in long-term field organizing and campaigns. With that kind of plant, they should have been doing work for 2 or 3 years, developing their contacts so that the most respected workers on the inside decided to go with the union. One of the other things that's confusing is people think that because there's not a union, that workplaces are not organized, and that's just false. Workplaces have tons of social organization, everything from prayer groups at lunch to bowling teams to young guys who like to go out and get drunk, and there's a whole group of social groups there. You've got to understand that. And if you spend the time, and in a plant like that, if we had spent the time working with the people in the plant, my understanding, it's written up in an article in the Nation, which I thought was very good, by McIlvaney, that the majority of the contact between workers and the union was done at the stoplight. People were spending all their time trying to talk to people when they stopped. If we're doing that kind of work, I'm not saying you never do leaflets and do stuff at the plant gate, but they did zero home visiting. And one of the things I was trained in, if you don't do home visiting, you lost the campaign.
Are you telling me then that that there's a good likelihood, because for everything that you're explaining so far and what you're saying has happened in Alabama, are you telling me that this may not have been something that happened organically, but really it may have been an external force trying to use this as a test template, and they did it in a very wrong way? In other words, they didn't make sure to get the right plant, the right, for lack of a better term, virus inside of the buildings with the workers that are actually there?
Absolutely. That most workers would rather be in an organization that improves their working conditions and is a force to stand up for their rights. I mean, there were real issues there, like the way they dehumanized people about them being able to take bathroom breaks.
Right.
The way they had the work sped up so fast that it literally broke down people.
Right.
That people in that situation would want to change the thing, but they have to feel a confidence in the organization that's doing it. And when the organization takes shortcuts, and this might not have been the fault of the actual field organizer that was on the ground. Maybe he wanted to do more work, but the union wanted a quick victory and a public victory. And as a result, the union took shortcuts. And at that point, real social leaders back away from the union, and then voters. So there was a lot of pro-union workers there that, in my estimation, did not vote, or even some of them voted against the union because they didn't think that the union drive was right. Now, when you file an election for a group of workers and you're so far off on the estimate of the number of workers, where the union thought there was 1,500 workers and there was over 5,000, the union should not have kept on going. What they did was run around and try to pick up more cards to meet the minimum threshold. The way the industrial union part of the AFL-CIO, which is no longer funded, by the way, it had a very good program in Mississippi and North Carolina of doing long-term serious organizing, and budget cuts cut back on all of that stuff. And I think unions are making a mistake when you have accountants and public relations people making decisions instead of...
To some extent, you're making the case for many as far as the union needs to make structural changes before it actually becomes a force. It almost seems like the union became not the anti-corporation, but a corporation within its own right.
The last thing that you should cut when there's hard times in budgets, and a bunch of the union family communication workers, the technology, when you move from when you move to fiber cable from copper cable, needed drastically a smaller number of
workers,
a whole lot less workers. And when you close down a lot of manufacturing, that has an impact on the budget. The problem is when you're sitting down the organizing departments and then expect to somehow find a way to organize by having somebody who's very good at PR of rounding up progressives, who I think were wonderful in volunteering to do that. You're making a serious budgetary and a serious political mistake within the organizations. And the workers should not be put through a campaign unless we're doing everything we can the right way. It doesn't mean that you're not going to lose campaigns. The other thing that's going on in the press is just talking about how terrible the company was. I mean, we should be clear on this, that companies are not pro-union. If they are, they wouldn't force an election. They would do voluntary recognition, which a number of companies are finally doing with the labor movement. Not a lot, but a decent number. The anti-union activity is going to go on. There is a standard playbook, which they did there, which is not nice, which tries to squeeze people, that organizing has changed over the last 50 years. Years ago, they used to use thugs to beat organizers and to intimidate workers. Nowadays, they have psychologists, management experts in knowing how to pit workers against each other. They do a grid on workers and rate them 1, 2, and 3. As far as the workers who are so pro-union, just leave alone. The workers that are going to go with the company no matter what, and the workers that they have to concentrate on. We did a campaign in the early days of mobile systems in St. Louis, and we had a ratings of people by 1, 2, 3, and somehow we got a hold of the ratings that the companies had. that they either dropped it in the parking lot or somebody was related to somebody. I don't even know how we got it, but the ratings were almost identical. What the company had rated and what we had rated was almost identical. That's what you start with once you have a public campaign. So the trick is, don't go public. Spend the time organizing before there is a campaign. The campaign should only be there to validate your strength. The other dynamic is that organizing in the correct way, you spend a ton of time with workers telling them exactly what the company is going to do and discussing the issues they're going to raise, and you do it first. So what I would do is gather up all of, and I did campaigns for the steel workers, the International Union of Electrical Workers, and the communication workers. I would gather up all of the instances of union corruption. And I would do a session with the committee and handouts where they were supposed to go to all of the workers and talk about the union corruption. Now, what was good in most of the unions was the union corruption was identified. And so we would go through that. When the company tried to attack you on the union corruption, it went nowhere. We had already discussed it. On union dues, the company spent a whole lot of time on talking on union dues. That should not be a surprise to the union. And what I would do is take what I was trained in. So it wasn't just me, but it was training by experienced organizers. We do a whole session on the dues. We would print out the salaries of union officials and have a discussion of the money, where it went, and how it was used. If you do that in your organizing committee members and your most respected workers, where they have something to talk about. In this campaign, the company raised the question of union dues, and the union organized an internet battle between people all over the country sending in messages to Amazon, arguing over the dues question. And in fact, finally, the union said to them, in a right to work state, you don't have to pay union dues, which is like crazy. You're organizing to get workers to have real power. And you don't tell people money is a form of power. Organization is a form of power, and numbers is a form of power. You don't tell people, oh no, you don't have to give any money, just vote for the union and some other officials will fight for you. We're not interested in other people fighting for us. When you do organizing, you're interested in workers themselves doing something.
Let me just say, I think that is important for people to understand, because again, what I'm hearing from you, sadly, the unions have adapted the same culture almost as the corporate elite in some of what you're saying, not placing its money into organizers, but placing its money into PR. Unfortunately, what's being sold by corporations in general, PR can make wanted, while PR for workers has almost an inverse property.
That is a conclusion that you could come to by listening to me. I don't want to be that negative. There is literally many unions and many people in unions trying to do the right thing, but are facing real challenges with a lack of funding.
I want to interrupt you for one reason, because I think what
Okay.
you just said is very important. My intent was not to mask all unions with the statements that you're making.
Okay.
But
right.
And you're correct, and I thank you for calling that out, because I am a strong union supporter. But we have to call out.
No, I know you are.
Right, we have to call out when the unions fail, just like you mentioned in your past narrative. You put out, when you're starting to organize a new place, you put out a list of all the ills that the unions have done, so that it cannot be used as a hammer by the corporation when they're trying to say, look at what the unions have done here. I mean, just as well, we could say, look at what the corporations have done here. Actually,
Right.
Isn't it true that the Chamber of Commerce is just a union for corporations? Isn't it true that the Metallurgical Association is just a union for metal companies who have metal interests? So I mean,
Yeah.
why is it that the American worker is the only thing that folks don't want to get organized. And you can continue there, Danny.
There was a call center in Austin, and it was under the name of AT&T Wireless. This was before Southwestern Bell bought AT&T Wireless. And it was actually owned by the Japanese telephone company, and they were paying for the logo of AT&T. And people were having one hell of a time trying to get them organized by all sorts of methods. So we did something that they had done in the 30s. We recruited young people to get jobs there. Both of my sons and my nephew went and applied there. 2 of them got hired, and they got a bunch of their friends hired and other kids hired. And we built an underground organization within this 1,000-person call center for 5 years. Now, I had people above me saying, what the hell, it's taking so long. I mean, that was not the only thing I was working on, but there was enough support for organizing that said, leave him alone, let him do the thing. And we built a whole organization in that workforce over 5 years, and that we're strong enough to come open. And then Southwestern Bell bought AT&T, and we were allowed to use card check, and we were the biggest large call center organized in the country in a very short period of time. The other one was in Jackson, Mississippi, where people have been doing some serious organizing. Well, no, there's other examples of where people have done meticulous long-term campaigns. But in this campaign, we were talking about a big victory way before the election. It made me extremely uncomfortable. I hoped that we had a big victory, but none of the signs were. I worked for the Industrial Union Department of the AFL-CIO. They sent a person undercover to go through a training by Modern Methods Management, which was the biggest union busting firm. And they got their manual, and they went through the whole training. And then they came back and did a training for the field organizers. So we were trained in how to break a union. And that kind of training and investment in field organizers, I think it's being done very little at this point. And if we're going to turn around the labor movement, there has to be a serious investment in training of the fundamentals. The internet is not going to organize workers,
Right?
and I'm a little bit of a caveman when it comes to the internet, and so sometimes I don't have the credibility to argue against it. But the idea that you can send out messages on the internet and expect you're going to win things, it goes against the fundamentals of unions. Is workers collectively are faced with collective problems. They try to do collective efforts to win collective solutions.
I think that is so important what you just said, because a lot of people think that and in fact, I think the union and what we also call the what kind of economy do we call it now? The go economy or the gig economy. I think it gives people a false sense of what a lot of you did in the past on organizing, and not realizing that, yes, the union can be, the internet can be an assistance to helping the union, but it's not a replacement for flesh-to-flesh contact. It's not a replacement for having true relationships, because true relationships is what people trust. Danny, I don't have much time left, so I want to ask you one specific question. Please explain to folks exactly what is card check.
Card check is a process where the majority of people sign authorization cards that say they want to be represented by the union. You have an agreement from the employer that they will accept when a majority of the people sign the cards. We had an agreement with Southwestern Bell that it took a hard fight. It took 5 years to win it, where the employees had the right to win recognition. Now, we had a clause in it that the date did not start until the earliest card we signed. So we would sign up cards before anybody knew that we were doing it, before there was an anti-union campaign, and then deliver it to the company. And we had 2 months to do it. The one card had to be 2 months within the other one.
So these are cards for every employee that comes from the federal government, pretty much?
No, we designed our own cards, but it's when you get the recognition, it is a voluntary recognition. The company chooses to not fight the union. And we were able to win it with Southwestern Bell at the time because we put a tremendous amount of pressure. It was during the 80s when there was a lot of deregulation.
Now, what do they mean then, Danny, when they talk about the card check legislation? Exactly what was the card check legislation?
If we could get card check legislation, it would allow workers to be recognized by signing up the majority without ever having an election. You wouldn't need an election. The company would accept that. And there have been attempts at getting that through on the federal level. It has hit a brick wall because it's a very powerful thing.
Right, because
if the majority of the workers,
you have an eternity to sign up to the majority of the employees to and then once you get that amount, that union has to be recognized.
And there's no there is an anti-union campaign. As soon as they hear about you, they try to do it. So I think one of the most important things I want to say is, in union organizing, you should assume that they are going to try to clobber you. They're going to come up with every piece of dirt they can have on that individual union, on individuals, and run it at you. And if you do the preparation, which is called in union organizing inoculation, before pain becomes public, it's discussed in detail, boring. 3 months before the election, it's very hard for the company to make an issue of it the week before the election. And if union corruption is talked about, where we expose everything ourselves early on, then it is extremely hard for the company to try to come up and say corruption. Everybody says, oh yeah, we know about that. The organizer told us all of that. We got the paperwork on that. What do you? And it totally frustrates the union busters. But in this campaign, they were able to pick the timing of when the issues were discussed. If they control the timing, and if the union's doing the organizing, we should control the timing. And we have the ability to do it if we do a process which is called inoculation, which is letting people know all of the downsides of the union, and then talking about that together, working together, you can make a difference in your workplace. Not that a union representative will save you. Workers don't want a savior. They want the ability to have some sort of power and influence over their lives at work. We spend well over 50% of our working hours. Most workers don't work a 40-hour week. They work a lot more.
Absolutely.
And they would like some sort of control. Long-term adult workers understand that, and they have a respect for themselves. They put up with a lot of crap from the company, so they know what they're used to doing. But people will stand up if you emphasize building organizations and don't emphasize public relations.
Let's end it right there. Danny Fetante,
Okay.
former union organizer, former head of several organizations. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right, my friend. We know when we have these subjects, where to go. Thank you very much, Danny.
Thank you, Egberto.
Today we have a very special guest. Author Kanegis is president of Future Wave Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to shifting our culture of violence to a culture of peace. He is the director producer of The World Is My Country, about the amazing adventures of world citizen #1, Gary Davis. Prior to producing the feature-length documentary, he produced the award-winning short film on the same subject, One, The Gary Davis Story, and wrote an award-winning screenplay for a narrative feature as well. Before that, Kanegis produced War Without Winners, narrated by Paul Newman and filmed by Haskell Wexler, a compelling TV documentary on the nuclear war issue. Welcome to Politics Done Right, author. How are you doing today?
A real pleasure to be with you, Egberto. Looking forward to your show.
Absolutely. So, but anyhow, let's go ahead and get busy about. Tell me a little bit about yourself first. What got you into doing documentaries of this nature?
Well, when I was working on actually doing the War Without Winners film with Paul Newman, we also got the opportunity to do to help with the film the day after. I was just a researcher on it, but I was there in Washington D.C. and when they were building the sets, and they said, okay, 1 mile from the epicenter, what's it going to look like? I'd go over to the Pentagon, do all the research, and fax it out to them. It was before we had email. We'd fax back and forth.
Right.
And I woke up with nuclear war nightmares. I mean, I would wake up and say, usually you can say, oh, there's not really monsters under the bed, but there were monsters under the bed and all around us, and we could be destroyed in a moment's notice. And I just started to get paralyzed with fear. And I then thought back to what a song we'd sang when we were in first day school in Quaker meeting, and it said, there's an ocean of darkness, and I drowned in the night till I came through the darkness to the ocean of light, and the light's forever, and the light makes us free. I'll dwell in the glory of the light, said he. And what struck me about that is the deeper you dig into almost any area, you get to think, if you thought that was bad, it's worse than that. And if you thought that was bad, it's 100 times worse. And if you thought that was bad, wait till you hear this. And you can drown in that. And at the same time, all around the world, people are helping each other, reaching out. I'm in Rotary, all over, we're helping people get glasses, vision, people helping dogs get spayed and neutered, people loving their kids, there are flowers growing, oceans out here. And there's an ocean of light. And I decided that I wanted to dwell in that ocean of light. If what we imagine helps create our reality, then why do we keep imagining only horrible things and wondering why we're not getting to the positive future? And I decided to dedicate my life to films that gave us a vision and hope and the joy of experiencing moving into the positive future that we the people can create in the people-powered planet.
I love the little sign behind her. And what you said is so profound. I remember watching The Day After, and that movie, it made you upset because these are all things that are controllable, things that you have control over, that doesn't have to be that way. So I enjoyed that. Now, when you talk
about what you said, I love what you said about control over, because that's the key. I mean, some things, the meteor hits us, okay, maybe there's nothing we can do about it, but there's no reason why we have to so stupidly get ourselves in a position to destroy our own planet. And you see this picture, Wizard of Oz, that right. Gary used to love, the guy who did the movie about, used to love the Wizard of Oz, because she kept thinking, oh, the high and mighty wizard's going to save us. I've got to find him. And he turned out to be this guy behind the curtain. And she realized the power wasn't her all along. She just had to click her feet together. And we just have to click our minds to thinking of ourselves as world citizens. And we can rise above these nation states and these divisions that are dividing us. And we, the people, do have the power to create the beautiful people-powered planet of our dreams. And that's what the movie Gary Davis, The World Is My Country, is really all about.
Before we get into that, though, because I want to give, we are a political show that give a whole lot of context to a whole lot of stuff. And what you just said was ever more profound. And I want to mention this, when we talk about having control, when we talk about not only thinking about, when you talk about the sea of darkness, as opposed to why not look at the sea of light, we are in control. We can determine whether we have a sea of darkness or whether we have a sea of light. I think that is a focus, that is a tunnel vision that we ought to have. The reason the planet is in the condition it is not because of the masses, but because of the few who control the masses, the few who are instantiating things that create all the problems that we have. So there are so many permutations to what you've said that yeah. I think if you make more movies about it, if you make more movies that people want to watch about it, it'll enlighten them. One of the things we do here is we try to get people to get out of the indoctrinated state that they're in within these countries and start yes. thinking more broadly. And I think it's great what you did. You centralized this particular project of yours on Gary Davis.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Gary Davis first, and then we'll expand on that.
Excellent. Well, Gary started off All he wanted to do was to make people laugh. He was a song and dance man on Broadway. And he got in the chorus of Let's Face It. And he got to stand in when Danny Kaye got laryngitis. He got to stand in for the great Danny Kaye in the golden age of Broadway. And he got 13 curtain calls. People couldn't believe this kid on his way to a Broadway career. Boom, World War II. He's in a bomber plane. He's bombing the city of Brandenburg, and his own brother is killed. And he says, my God, why am I killing other people's families and brothers just because they're on the wrong side of some invisible line that I can't even see from the air? This is insane. And he gets home, sees footage of Hiroshima, says humanity is in trouble. But what can I do? You know, I'm just an actor. And then he gets this brilliant idea. He goes to Paris, where the United Nations is meeting, and with Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, all these famous intellectuals, he ends up interrupting a session of the UN and pulling off this grand act of political theater that rivets war-weary Europe. 20,000 people rally with him at the Velodrome on December 9th. And the very next day, the 10th, the Soviets, who for years have been blocking the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, step aside and let it get passed unanimously. So it's an incredible story about a man who was a citizen of no nation, only the world, and the incredible adventures he had with, and for instance, Einstein said that Gary grasped the key to whether humanity will die by its own hands or continue to exist.
Now, as I understand it, he was drafted into the army. He flew B-17 bombers. He bombed a few towns, etc. And there's something about his brother being killed, giving him that catharsis, if you will. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, okay, so he's this B-17 bomber pilot. It was an incredible plane that could get through all kinds of flak and keep flying. And he had he was gleeful about bombing Peenemünde, the war plants of Hitler. But when he was ordered to bomb Brandenburg, something snapped, and it happened because his own brother had been killed at Salerno, and his heart was broken. And he was just his brother was like almost like a dad to him. He was an older brother, and his dad had been on the road. He was a big showman with the Meyer Davis Orchestra. Played for 11 different presidential balls, all the way from Hoover, Kennedy, and so on. And this was a catharsis for him. I mean, imagine the pain that you've just blown all these people up in their schools and factories. He said, why wasn't I arrested for that? Why weren't the people who killed my brother arrested? And he came to an incredible realization. He said, inside every country on the planet, it's illegal to murder people. Outside, it's not. There's no law at the global level. I can murder somebody, I can get a medal for it. This is crazy. Inside a country, like when we had a domestic act of terrorism, like when Tim McVeigh blew up the Federal Building in Oklahoma, they didn't retaliate against the Michigan for harboring the Michigan militia. I mean, it's a criminal justice thing. He thought, well, my God, if we can create, world courts, if we can have a governing system for the world, we can outlaw war. But then what about how we see the horrible, terrible things governments do? And he says in the film, does world government scare you? He says, well, it does me too. If it's that same old, forces of power and money, the new world order. But that's happening, folks. That's the corporations and money acting globally. You see, originally in Jefferson's day, the corporations were under the people. They got a 20-year charter. If they didn't serve the public need, it would get revoked. People could control them. But because we're locked in those boxes called nation states and they're operating globally, they said, oh, you try to control us, we'll move to another country. You try to control our pollution, we'll go there. You try to tax us, oh, no, please stay here. We need your jobs. And so they got to be on top. They got all the power and money. They pick our politicians. They run the world. But every constitution and the Declaration of Independence that Gary realized says it is the right of the people it is the right of the people to institute government. The Declaration says the will of the people shall be the authority of government. Similar words all over say that we're supposed to be in charge. And where are we in charge globally? Can we elect anybody to go to the UN? Can we vote for anybody? Do we have any say in at all at the global level? No. So what are we going to do? Wait for them to give it to us? Did the people who put out the Declaration say, oh, please, England, won't you won't you let us be a country? There's not an application for independence. It's a declaration, for God's sake. So you don't apply, you just do it. And Gary said, just like Dorothy, who clicked her feet together, we just have to realize we're the ones with the power, and we, the people, get together and build a whole new interactive system, not win-lose democracy, Gary advocated, but something he built around Buckminster Fuller's geodesic sphere idea, something where we're all on top of that sphere, that whole new organization kind of chart way of doing it. And in little like Zoom meetings like this, but with tools that bring us together, you get Arabs and Israelis in the same Zoom, and red states, blue states, whatever. And you have this toolbox of interactive, revolutionary conversations, finding out what's people's real hopes and needs, what do they want, bring them together, and coming together with a consensus of what we, the people, want in building the planet we choose. And so it's a powerful vision and a powerful spark for inspiring us to start thinking about how to create a better way to run our world. And that's what drew me to want to do this incredible movie.
Well, I mean, that is excellent to have Martin Sheen be the one that is promoting the movie. I think it's on PBS this month, correct?
Yes, it's on public television stations across the country. Each local station is doing it at different times and places. There's over 50 stations so far, and there's more coming every day. If you go to theworldismycountry.com and click on, well, you'll see the button right at the top, public TV. It shows you the ones that are already playing it, what their times are, and so on. And also how if you don't see your city there, how you can help get it there. We just had, for instance, in Vermont and in Albuquerque, we had stations that when they got a lot of interest from the local community and people involved, especially if people want to run local spots about their organization during it, they've jumped on board to show it. So we'll let you know how you can be part of the community support your stations want. They don't want people lobbying them to do things, but they do want to know they've got community support.
Well, I mean, that is so important. I mean, I want to go back to something you mentioned, because what you talk about nation states, you talk about when McVeigh blew up a building, nobody says, let's go bomb Michigan. But if somebody from Saudi Arabia or somebody from Eritrea comes here and they bomb something, we go blow without looking at the consequences of what we do. Makes a whole lot of sense. We have to remember Davos. You made a very important point. The corporation used to be below the people. Now they're above the people. In fact, they have something called personhood, which means they are a super person.
Boy, yeah.
They're a super person, and they operate out. I mean, not they operate. They congregate in Davos, where they run the world. So we already have a one world government. It's just that it's controlled by a very few. What we're talking about is government where we, the people, are all in control. And a lot of people think that is utopia. The next book I'm writing is called I'm almost done with it right now. It's called How to Make America Utopia. And it really should be, in the long run, how to make the world utopia. And the thing that people don't understand is, go back to what you're saying here. It's a matter of getting to people in these different manners that you spoke about, via Zoom, via getting congregations between Israelis and Palestinians, between the red and the blue. All of these are false divisions created to keep a few in power. And that's one of the reasons I don't get mad at my opponents. I'm a left winger. I don't get mad at my right wing brothers. I embrace them. Yes. And in listening to you and watching you, I see that that's the same modus operandi that you're following, which I think it's important. Look, we're getting close to the end of this things. Usually I ask a lot of questions, but somebody like you, it's not necessary because you promote it all in your narrative. So I appreciate that. But what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't ask you?
Why don't you ask me about our People Powered Planet podcast, where every week people can tune in?
Well, tell me.
Okay.
You don't have to tell me to ask you. You go ahead and you throw it out there, brother.
Every Wednesday at 10 a.m., we have a People Powered Planet podcast where we bring in guests like you who've been thinking about this. How do we build this better world? We're looking for solutionaries. And I want to hear about your new book, because maybe you're just the kind of solutionary we want to have on our show. And just go to peoplepoweredplanet.com and you'll see. You can sign up for a weekly club, or you can try it out free, and just come join us in helping to find the solutions to the problems of the world that start with we the people, as you mentioned, and take our power back. We the people on the planet. You know, we are the superpower. That's why they like to keep us divided and in these separations. The more they can divide and separate us and get us mad at each other, that's how they stay in power. But once we the people come together, you know what's going to happen? They're going to at a certain point stop fighting us and say, "Oh, we want to join you." They're going to put out ads. You know, we're part of the people powered planet. We want to support you. We want, you know, when they fight like they fought seatbelts, tooth and nail. But when they had to do it, then, oh, it's put out in all their ads. We're all for it, you know. So we the people have to take back our power. They're only doing that not because they're bad, evil people, but because money is forcing them. The monetary system is forcing them into that. We have to start evolving a new economy, a new circular economy, and we the people are the ones to do it.
Author Kanegis, president of Future Wave and director of the Gary Davis story, and the new film is called?
It's called The World Is My Country. The World Is My Country.
The World Is My Country. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely.
Maybe on our show.
Absolutely. Again, please remember to keep your community radio station, KPFT 90.1 FM, in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends to tune in to 90.1 FM Houston or listen at kpft.org. Keep us on air by donating what you can afford at our website, kpft.org. Once again, remember, you can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is facebook.com/Politics Done Right, or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. That is politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto, at EGBERTOWILLIES. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out! Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.